This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everyone. We are just trickling in with attendees, so we're going to give it a few minutes and then we will get started probably around 7:03 to 7:05. Welcome, everyone. If you just joined, I see that our numbers going up. If you just joined, we are going to give everyone a few minutes to trickle in because we've got a good group that has signed up for today, and we'll get started in about a couple minutes.
We just got a message from Minnie that she didn't get the link.
Oh, okay. I will send it to her right now. Thank you for seeing that. Okay, I just forwarded it to Minnie, so hopefully that works. All right, another welcome to our attendees. We are going to start here in just a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for some more people to trickle in. Hi, Minnie.
Hi. Sorry, didn't mean to try to give you a heart attack there.
Oh, no worries. I'm wondering if Lisa just got kicked off since you also have.
It says she's still there because two of us can be in at one time. I'm just going to change my name.
Awesome.
Thankfully mine still worked because I
Perfect.
didn't get the link and I was like, oh God.
Oh no. Sorry for the little bit of a scare for you too. That is no fun when we're just starting a
That doesn't matter. Hey, at least I remembered I could get in.
Yeah, perfect. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? It looks like we have about 10 attendees right now, so I think that people will be continuing to join. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today. This is part of our Ask the Expert series for the Charleston Foundation. And today's topic is on transition, which has been a highly requested topic. And so we are very, very excited to have our panel of experts with us today. And I'm going to pass it over to each of them to introduce themselves. And just as a reminder to everyone who's here, this session is being recorded. So if you have any questions or anything that you don't want to be recorded, send it privately or maybe reach out to some of the presenters after the fact. So Minnie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'll go first. So I'm Minnie Lambert. I live in South Carolina and I am mom to Andrew, who next Saturday will be 20 years old. And we are anticipating our last year of school now. So we are in that process. So in smack dab in the middle of transition avenues.
A fun time.
Yes.
Nancy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Nancy Hartshorn. I'm mom to Jacob. I didn't ask him to come over because he lives next door to us, but we have had a huge snowstorm today. So I was just going to show his picture.
I'm glad to see you have power, Nancy.
Yes, we do. There's Jacob.
Yay.
Yeah, Jacob is 33. And so he went through transition quite a while ago. And he lives in his own home next door to us, as I said, has jobs in the community, and has lots of friends.
And Jody.
Hi, I am Jody Beavers. I'm from Michigan, and I am mother to Nolan. So copying Nancy, here's a picture of Nolan, who happens to be in the bathtub at the
Now I
moment.
gotta go again. Now I
Yeah,
gotta go.
we'll circle back to you, Minnie.
Yeah. And Nolan is 20 years old. He'll be 21 in May, and he's looking very forward to having his first beer.
Ooh, I bet. Does he know what does he have like a certain type that he's wanting to go for?
Whatever his dad and brother has.
Makes sense. All right, Minnie, I'll pass it back to you so you can show.
Okay,
show
well,
your
I mean,
picture.
we could just look at Nolan again because this is Andrew.
Nice.
We all, Jody and I always joke about them being twins, so
Mhm.
'cause they look so much.
They
Now
definitely could be
Andrew
brothers.
refuses. Yeah, brothers. Andrew refuses to wear his glasses, so now they look a little different. So,
Mhm. So today we will be starting out by having each of our panelists give a little bit of information about their transition journey thus far with their adult children. If anyone has questions throughout, please feel free to send it in the Q&A chat. I'll be monitoring that and asking questions. We really encourage you to ask questions. I see that we have a hand raised. Krista has her hand raised. Krista, do you have something that you want to ask? Or I see the hand go down, maybe not. All right, if you have something that you want to ask, feel free to raise your hand. All right, so starting off, maybe we can start by hearing about school and what was involved in your child's transition, or what's currently involved in your child's transition program or transition plan. If you could describe the process, and if you've already gone through it, maybe anything you might do differently or want to consider.
Who do you want to call on?
Nancy, you, because you said something.
Oh. Okay, well, we started Jacob's transition plan when he was really little by using person-centered planning, if you're familiar with that. We did a person-centered plan for him when he was 5 years old, before he started kindergarten. And even in that person-centered plan, one of the things we said our dreams were for him, did I say that right? Okay, was to live in his own home someday in the neighborhood with the support he needed. We didn't know at that time whether he'd be able to be independent or not, because he was still just so little. But I mean, it was our dream that no matter what, he would live in a safe place that he enjoyed. And so as he went through school, we continued to have person-centered plans. I think maybe he had 5 altogether before he got out of school. In Michigan, kids in special ed can go to school till they're 26. So we had a lot more time to plan transition for him. And now he lives in his own home, and it all happened because of person-centered planning. I will say that the school didn't have much to do with that. That all came down to other agencies, and he has a Medicaid waiver that pays for his staff. But what the school did really help with was his transition to work. Because he could go till he was 26, from the age of 18 to 26, they were pretty much trying him out in different kinds of jobs in the community and training him and giving him the communication he needed around those things. He doesn't have a lot of formal language, so they would teach him pictures that went with things, teach him the routines. And some of those jobs he's still doing, and some he's got other new jobs in the community. But our push has always been for an inclusive education and inclusive work, inclusive living environment. So he doesn't work. A lot of people with disabilities where we live work on like a crew. So they'll all go out and do a job together, or they all go to a hotel and clean rooms. But Jacob pretty much has individualized work. So when he's in the community, he's not that there's anything wrong with disabled people with disabilities, but he pretty much works among non-disabled peers. He also has 14 college students that take care of his needs while he's at home and are kind of interveners for him, and help him connect to the community and his jobs. And so we consider them sort of his non-disabled peers as well. They take him to their apartments and they go to the park together and they do all kinds of, outings. we just had his person-centered plan for this year, the agency one, which is just like a one-page checkoff list. It's not really the same thing. And she said that one of Jacob's goals was to have an outing every month. I was like, Jacob goes out twice a day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he really is included in the community. People know him around here. It's a small town and it's worked out well. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Nancy. And then let's see, I'm trying to look between Jody and Minnie to see if either of them are giving me eyes that they want to go next.
Okay. Yep, I can go. I'm going to give a little bit of a historical perspective on Nolan, so you can see what led up to our decision. So when Nolan started out in elementary school, he was like on fire. He was learning everything. He was doing great in gen ed. And so he was always half-time in the deaf and hard of hearing program, and then half-time included in gen ed classrooms. And we continued this until 6th grade, when it started to fall apart a little bit because the gen ed classes became more content heavy and vocabulary heavy, and Nolan became more and more unhappy. And so he started having behaviors, and we continued to push, and we wanted him to do gen ed with accommodations. We still had a diploma in mind, and he just kept getting more and more unhappy and had more and more behaviors. And so we finally decided that behavior really is communication. And so we are going to listen, and we're going to try him out in the MOSI room. And so that's the moderately cognitively impaired room. And so he did half-time deaf and hard of hearing, half-time MOSI, and it completely changed his entire school experience. He loved it. He loved the peers in that program. I think he just felt very comfortable there. And they did a lot of social skills work, which he needed. And he started job sites early in his career, so probably 7th or 8th grade. And they did community, like, fun stuff too. So they would go to the pool and the gym, and he was so much happier in that program that's what made us decide to let go of the diploma track, and we're going to let him do his thing. And so from there, he stayed in that program, which half DHH and half MOSI, and through 9th grade. And at that point, Michigan, like Nancy said, offers education until the age of 26. So now Nolan participates in community-based education. So he goes to school every day, and at school, he works on social skills like cooking, life skills like cooking and budgeting and things like that. And he also has job sites. And so currently he's working at a restaurant in town, and he works at the local sportsplex, which he loves. And every year his job sites change. So he's worked in grocery stores and barber shops, and they actually get paid. He gets a paycheck. And then he uses that paycheck to go shop for his weekly needs. So he buys his own stuff for lunch. He has to plan and prepare his lunch. And so he loves school. He hates snow days. So it has been a good program for him. And so the goal is by the time he's 26 and done with CBE, he will have a job. So one of his job sites will turn into his paid job. And that's the goal.
That's very cool. I hope that he's, well, I'm assuming there's some snow days in Michigan right now. So hopefully he's doing okay in these snowy conditions where he doesn't get to go do all the fun things.
Right. He's not happy about it, but
I bet
we can make it fun.
Yeah. All right, Minnie, over to you to hear a little bit more about Andrew's journey.
Okay, well, we don't have snow days in South Carolina, but
Mhm.
so how Jody and Nancy was talking, Michigan goes to 26, but in the state of South Carolina, our wording is through the 21st term. So that means not until until school ends in that 21st year. And I say that because that's very important. Each state regulation is a little bit different, so it's written different. And that's kind of important when it comes to our kiddos, because if they say, through the 21st year, that actually means that they can go until they turn 22 and then they'll be done. But the backstory when it comes to Andrew is, Andrew was always ready for school, but school was never ready for Andrew. That's the way that I lay that out there. When Andrew was 3 years old, when he was graduating from early intervention, he blowed his speech therapist's mind because he took blocks and spelled his name that day. And she's like, he's 3 years old and he just spelled his name, and his name is not Joe. I'm like, "Mhm." So when he went to school, he already knew all of his shapes, all of his colors, all of his alphabet, all of these kind of things. But Andrew kind of got stuck in that gap, and the gap kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It got to the point to where his mom learned about deafblindness, and his mom learned about all of the things that Andrew needed. And she also learned through the process that Andrew was not as abnormal as people wanted him to believe. Andrew was a typical child with Charge syndrome. And as Jody talked about, those behaviors that Andrew was exhibiting was Andrew trying to tell us something. As when Andrew was growing up, his mama was also growing up right along with him. And once we got past all of the stuff and realized, okay, I kind of like this whole advocacy part and, doing all this kind of stuff. I am on our education team for our Parent Training Information Center in our state. And I've learned a little bit along the road to doing that. So, and met some nice people. And we advocated for Andrew when Andrew was leaving out of the 7th grade, because we had got to the point where Andrew was in a secluded classroom. Andrew had his very own teacher. He had a one-on-one teacher, a one-on-one assistant, a one-on-one interpreter. He had a one-on-one behavioral specialist. He had OT, PT, speech, all behavior people, all of these people, but nobody was meeting Andrew's needs as a deafblind student. In 2016, our district was in some heated battles with the State Department of Education. And I also took that valuable opportunity to file a big complaint against our school district because they were allowing the special education children to leave school at like 2 o'clock. The regular children didn't leave till 3:30. Andrew was supposedly be receiving some services that he was not receiving. Anyway, we came back with the complaint, and Andrew was owed 215 educational hours, along with lots of hours through therapy services. And we did allow our district to try, but I kept getting the Miss Minnie, they need to learn him. Miss Minnie, they need to learn him. And I kept saying, no, this is Andrew's time to learn. Andrew's already missed the time for people learning him. Now Andrew's time to learn. So I called up Martha Majors from Perkins, and I just asked her, I was like, is there any summer program or anything like that that we could use as my way of saying, can we do this? Because we need to send Andrew somewhere. And that summer, Andrew was, we were sent to Perkins, and Andrew was there. He only could be there for a couple weeks because that was a conference year. So as we all know, a lot of our Perkins people, they go to our conference and then Charge happened. So Andrew also had an eye surgery scheduled for that summer. We went right back to our same school district, but then I was armed with so much more because Andrew had walked into Perkins acting like he had been there his whole life. He was not the only person with a cane. And when somebody wasn't looking, that cane wasn't folded up and put away. He wasn't the only person that walked a little weird, or, because my favorite thing used to be is sit and watch all of them walk across the campus, and they all looked alike with their little, their the way that our children would charge, the way they walk, and they sashay, and he had like 69, 70 hours left, because when we went back to our regular school district, they placed him again with a one-on-one teacher, but this time they had hired him his own special teacher. He was a teacher of children with autism. And I'm like, oh, yay, another person that doesn't understand deafblindness. So that year, I took every piece of data that I could take, because in my mind, I never wanted to accept the fact that Andrew needed to be in Perkins, but I knew it. And that summer, the special education director, she's like, Miss Minnie, so how are you proposing that we make up the rest of this time? I was like, send him back. So Andrew and I packed up everything. And for 5 weeks, we lived on campus at Perkins. But the thing that was different this time is when we went back, I said, we need to start the process of teaching Andrew how to be here, because the next step will Andrew will come to school here. Perkins and I worked together that summer to transition Andrew into Cottage. very first night he had ever been away from his mama. Even in the hospital, they didn't know what to do with him. So at the hospital, I was the first person that was called to be bedside when he was intubated or anything like that. And Mama Bear and Advocate fought that night really, really hard. But now Andrew is in his 4th year at Perkins. He has I am actually in Massachusetts right now because Big Guy is advocating that on his 20th birthday, he wants to be with his friends.
Ooh.
And so I had to bring him back to school because this weekend is his birthday. And so he wanted to be here with his friends. So in Perkins, Andrew has not only flourished, but Andrew has learned, and Andrew has also taught Perkins a lot of what Andrew actually can do. Andrew, through COVID, has started his own little micro business. We always did like baking and all of that because he likes the mixing and the mulling together. But now Andrew's own little businesses. He has a little business called Doggy Works by Andrew because he's on the K9 catering team at school. And but also through Perkins, Andrew has tried out many other positions. He has worked in the Braille and Talking Book Library, labeling cartridges that goes out to blind consumers. As of right now, Andrew's paid job is Andrew works in the Braille factory called Perkins Solutions, where they make the Perkins braillers that are sent out through all over the country. Andrew makes a little teeny tiny part that goes on it. And it freaks me out every time I see him in full gear operating a press where he's mashing a button and pulling the lever. I'm like, oh my God, he's gonna mash his fingers off. But they're teaching him, about work safety and, all of those kind of things. Transition age, how Michigan is ahead of the game when they get to stay in school longer. Well, South Carolina, we can't stay longer. We just got to start the process sooner. So yay, South Carolina. So we were supposed to start transition process before the child turns 13 years old. And we're just now making sure everything is in line for Andrew. Andrew reminds me on a daily or 3 or 4 times a week that he only has 1 year left at Perkins and then he'll be all done. And our goal for Andrew is to work with Voc Rehab and Andrew be able to turn Doggy Works into a legitimate, little mini micro business, because that's what he says he wants to do. Because no matter what job they place him in, that's what he chooses that he always wants. He always wants to be making things with his hands. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And trying to make the pieces in Massachusetts meet the pieces in South Carolina, which is very, very difficult because it doesn't work the same, and trying to make sure all of those pieces fit for Andrew as well. So that's where we're at right now.
Awesome. It's so great to hear from all of you kind of what the journey was like. And Nancy, while you were talking, you spoke about person-centered planning, and I was wondering for those on the call who maybe haven't heard of that before, could you describe a little bit about that process? And Jody and Minnie, if you've had similar experiences, I encourage you to jump in as well.
Sure. Person-centered planning is a process where you have a facilitator that comes in to a meeting of a group of people that the individual has invited that they feel supported by. So family members, could be educators, could be therapists, anybody that they feel supported by. It's done in a neutral setting so that it's not really on the school's turf or the agency's turf. And it's genuinely person-centered. It's all about what the person wants for their life, what their dreams are for their life, and how all these people around the person can help them achieve those dreams. It's an open-ended brainstorming process that has very specific questions that you go through that start with very wide dreams, and at the very end you end up with an action plan that's very specific, and people in the group take on the tasks to make these things happen. So the last person-centered plan we had for Jacob, for example, everything is going well for him, but last year we had a person-centered plan specifically because we wanted to have a second person working for him as a lead worker. So we've always had one lead worker that sort of manages the house. I wanted a second person to do the hiring paperwork and the helping us find people to interview, because that's always fallen on me. And I'm getting older and it's a lot of work. It's like a part-time job having to keep track of all that stuff, all the trainings that the agencies need. So we had a person-centered plan and we all sat around and we said, Jacob needs this, and the agency agreed to it. So it's a very powerful process. If I have my community mental health agency who holds the purse strings sitting there and 20 people who love Jacob saying, Jacob needs this, it's really hard for them to deny that. But it's more than that. It's just a really powerful process. It's different than an IEP. It's different than, any other agency, doctors getting together, making decisions about the person, because it's about the person making decisions for themselves or their family and friends, helping them to communicate what they think would be best for the person if they can't formally communicate it.
Thanks, Nancy. Jody or Minnie, did you have anything that you wanted to add, or has that been part of Nolan or Andrew's journey?
Nolan has had a person-centered plan one time. I think it was right when he was entering high school. And so it was very powerful for his team to get to know him, because his high school team didn't know him very well. It's probably time for him to have another one. It's been a while.
Awesome. Thanks, Jody.
Yeah, so on the first time we were exposed to the whole concept of person-centered planning was when we got to Perkins. And when Nancy talked about that whole outcome, the whole action list that you get, I'm very in favor of them, because I'm an action list kind of person. And then when you look at it, you can see what agencies may be missing from, who haven't you contacted? And, as I said, one of our barriers is me trying to fit South Carolina and Massachusetts together, because the people here, they know Massachusetts, where I am supposed to be, I have to know South Carolina, because it's such a big difference. And so that part, with looking at it as to what would benefit Andrew, has been a big piece of it. And now we're in the process of Maryland Trader with HKNC is putting together Andrew meetings, where we have everybody from South Carolina and Massachusetts. All of us are together. And then the next thing that will be done after the first meeting, we just kind of talked about what all we did and who all was there. And then a couple meetings later, we're going to get into another person-centered plan, where there's going to be more of that South Carolina input, because at some point we have to change from looking at educating Andrew as a child that is at a residential school in Massachusetts to meeting Andrew's needs as a child as an adult, back in South Carolina. I'm sorry, I'm telling him all the time, you still gonna be my baby. But he'll say adult. I'm like, okay, whatever. But him and Nolan, they're liable to drink beers together by the time we don't. So, but
Man,
yes,
one of the next
did
charge
find it very
conferences.
charge conference. Yes, so we did find it very useful as well. And Nancy is one of the people that comes up to Perkins and trains the Perkins staff on person-centered plans and things like that. And I've actually, in my job, I've actually taken it back to South Carolina to say, sometimes parents don't know what they don't know. And we went in that day and everything was written on the wall, and we're able to brainstorm together. That action list was so, it was very beneficial at the end. That was the best part about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's really great to hear that that this has been a part of all of your adult children's journey. And right now I'm putting some resources into the chat. There's been lots of questions, and Nancy, thank you for answering those as we've been going. But I've just put some links into the chat that have more information about how to get started with this. I think that person-centered planning is definitely best practices, and at the same time, a lot of times families have to advocate very strongly for that kind of process, because it's not the norm. And so I think it can be helpful to come in prepared with additional information about how this can work. All right.
I would just say something. Sometimes it's hard to find a facilitator. So people will say, I can't find a facilitator anywhere. Will you do it for us? And that's hard for me, because I don't really want to go all over the world and do that. But But there are people in every state, and often the deafblind projects know who the people are or will help themselves to do it.
Mhm. Thanks, Nancy. I'm also putting a publication that was done through the Australian Charge Association that is written about adults with charge all over the world and kind of how they reached adulthood and what happens. That might be of interest for people as well. All right, so let's see. Maybe let's move into employment or further education. How did each of you, or how are you supporting your adult children in figuring out what they wanted to do after graduating from school?
Well, I can speak to that first. So Michigan has a technical institute for students with disabilities, and Nolan's pretty good academically. And so his CBE teacher, his community-based education teacher, said that might be a possibility for him. And so ever since she planted that seed in him, that is a big dream of his, because it's like a college. They would go, they would live in the dorms. And so we have to see if his communication will become good enough to support that. So he's got two goals. He's got to improve his communication and his speech. He was born with cleft lip and palate. And so his speech is very unintelligible to most people. Unless you really know him and know the topic, he's very hard to understand. And so he's got to work on improving his speech. He just had his double jaw surgery that most kids with cleft lip and palate do have when they're 18. Because of COVID, we were slowed down, so he just had it, and that made his speech even worse. So he does have a communication device. He uses touch chat to communicate, but that is not his preferred method of communication. He just wants people to be able to understand them or understand him. And so sometimes he gets frustrated when they don't, and he just chooses not to talk. And so he's got to improve his communication and his social skills in order to be able to go to MCTI. So that's one of the things that we're looking at and hoping for.
Thanks, Judy. And
The
then
question was, how did we help?
Yeah, like basically how do you help your adult children kind of explore their interests and like kind of figure out what they might be interested in after school?
Okay, so for Jacob, like I said, he had about 8 years of trying out different jobs, and we found the ones that he hated and the ones that he liked. Again, he can't communicate to us what he likes and doesn't like in other ways than behavior typically. But one new job that he has that I think he really likes, that just sort of fell into our laps, which is cool because, he's deafblind, he loves lights, he loves colors, is at the Children's Museum. There's a light room, and there's like this giant wall of a light box with all these plastic rods of different colors in it. And so he gets a basket of those, washes them, sanitizes them, and then he gets to put them all back in the light box. And it's just perfect for him, In all, Jacob doesn't like working. He's a lot like his mother, kind of sedentary, but he also has the balance issues too and stamina issues, and would prefer not to work at all. But he's got to be busy. We got to keep him healthy, keep his body healthy. So he learns by routine, and once he's got the routine, he's pretty much happy to do it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah, so I touched base a little bit about Andrew and what he has chosen to do. But I was really big at it. I didn't want to pigeonhole Andrew into, oh, you like making doggy treats, you're going to have a doggy business, because what if that's his hobby? There's people that bake and, do all of those things. So I did see the question earlier about agencies and things like that. So we have started exploring a little bit with South Carolina Voc Rehab. And, we went in there and did his intake. And when she talked to him, and she's like, Andrew, what do you want to do at school? Doggy works. I mean, that's what he says every single time. So I can't not allow him to do what he likes to do. And like Nancy just was talking about the life size light bright that all of our children go full over at these children's museums. One of the things that we have to do is figure out what they like. and we can start a list. This is things that he likes. So I can remember when our deafblind project came in, and we were going to work with Andrew with some of the things that he wanted to do as he got older. We had pictures and things like this, like, Andrew, what do you want to do? Well, he couldn't answer that question, but he was very quick to tell us what he did not want to do. He did not want to work with children. It had a big red X across the front of it. And so, Andrew, do you want to work with children? No. So he was very, very adamant about that. So, listening to them and communicating to them in their language. Some of the interest, skills, and inventories that I'd see him giving him at school was like black and white. And it was like, he was just, they had a day he was going to work on cars. I'm like, first of all, he could do that, but I don't think that he would want to do that, because Andrew's not going to do it. So, figuring out what they like and what they don't like. And then just remembering that, like Nancy just talked about something that Jacob loves to do. It's not when what's that saying, that when you do something that you love, you don't work a day in your life. Jacob doesn't acknowledge it as work, because he's getting to do something that he likes to do. And the end of it, the thrill is being able to put those, lights back into it. So to know that everything that we do, there is a job inside of everything, even if it's going to the restaurant and wrapping silverware, somebody has to do it. And so the way that I look at it is why not my child, right? Why not Andrew? So with Andrew, we're going the customized employment route for right now, because that's what he wants to do. But every now and then he keeps reminding me that he wants to go stock the shelves at the Dollar Tree, because Dollar Tree is very predictable. Everything's the same price in the Dollar Tree, although he doesn't like to go there as much now that they've changed it to the $1.25 tree, and now they have the $3, $5. He's like, no. So, but he does like order, and he likes lining things up, and all of that. So a shelf stalker would be a perfect position. But we have to be realistic in what they can and cannot do. We'd never write that my child would be able to go, that would want to go into the military, because that's not a possibility. So also having realistic expectations of them. But for right now, Andrew is evolving to say that he wants to be a business owner. So that's the way that we're going to go with it. Until he changes direction.
As many young adults do. We have a question in the chat about how any of you have continued to provide deafblind intervener supports, or really support around deafblind communication. And I think it might also be helpful if we start by explaining a little bit about what deafblind interveners are, because depending on the state that participants are coming from, they may or may not be common there. Does anyone that? You want to start, Nancy?
Yeah, deafblind intervener is kind of a combination between an interpreter and a teacher. They help the person who is deafblind connect with the world and help the world connect with the person. And so, like for Jacob, an intervener would be, would assist him to be as independent as possible in all aspects of his life. So if he needs help with dressing, they try to help teach him to become more independent in making his foods and going to his jobs and everything. But at the same time, realizing that he's deafblind and needs assistance with some things, they provide the assistance that he needs, and they communicate with him constantly and help him communicate his needs to the world. Jacob has what I call Jacob interveners, because when they come to work for him, we train them. They get some training in deafblindness. They get some training in charge syndrome. It's mostly online stuff that I ask them to read through. But mostly what they get training is on Jacob, and they learn his calendar systems, his communication modes. I mean, you went through it, Lily, because you worked with him for a while. So
yeah, it's very extensive. And
I wouldn't say he has fully trained deafblind interveners, but they know him well enough to be able to give him what he needs. So they're Jacob interveners.
One thing that I really appreciated as working with Jacob is that there's a notebook that stays at his house, and every person during their shift, they kind of write down like what kind of day he was having. So kind of in addition to the the schedule that everyone knows about and like the training. There's also kind of ongoing communication about what Jacob's day has looked like, what kind of day he's had, what he's done, anything that people should know. So it really keeps ongoing communication, which is really, really helpful.
And
But
he has 14 people who work with him.
Mhm.
It's a big staff,
Mhm.
but it works out somehow.
Yeah. Jody, I think you were going to talk.
Yeah, Nolan's had an intervener since he was 5 years old. And they really do, for him, they have to bridge the communication gap that he has between he and his peers and he and his work site. So last summer, he had the opportunity to work at our local water park. And it was like they would go in before the water park opened and they would do some cleaning. And he worked on a crew but he did not have an intervener. And that did not go so smoothly. Not for the coach that was on site that had the whole crew of kids, or for Nolan, because he is a very hard worker once he understands the routine and the directions, but he can't get that the first time through. So if he's got a coach that has 8 individuals on the team and they give out the directions, that's not going to be enough for Nolan. So he needs that intervener to help him understand what the directions are and then to help him communicate his questions and make sure he understands. So the intervener is imperative. I'm kind of stressed about what happens after 26 when the intervener isn't just a given anymore, but we'll figure that out when we get there, I guess.
Yeah, so our story is a little bit different because we come from a state that does not recognize interveners. Andrew, I actually was the very first child in our school district to be educationally classified as deafblind. So we're light years away from understanding what an intervener is here. Even though we pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, sometimes you just got to figure it's not worth it anymore. And it's very hard because he is at Perkins. Massachusetts also does not recognize interveners, but Andrew is in an educational program that's the whole philosophy that is built on. They don't call it interveners, but access to communication and language and all of that is what the Perkins program is built on. So we have recognized that this is going to be one of our biggest barriers, is being able to have somebody like that to be able to work with Andrew when he comes back home. And so we are pulling our deafblind project and we're pulling Helen Keller and all the people together to try to figure out how are we going to make this happen, because Andrew has a history of now having I call it an access person, because that's really what it is. A person that can help Andrew access the world and the world access Andrew. Mm-hmm. And now we're going to be at a place where we don't have that. And yes, it makes me freak out a little bit, but I'm also going to be that mama that's ready to punch the wall to make somebody do it. So that's our biggest barrier right now, is trying to make sure that we continue that. Because I'm like, here I am again. I don't want Andrew to get stumbled up because somebody has to learn Andrew, right? And as you talked about that book, that's probably magic to everybody that's coming in there, because if he had a bad day last night, okay, well, that might be why he's a little bit sluggish today. And so having somebody that can learn all of those pieces, and some days they don't feel good on some days. I mean, Andrew's already had 4 open heart surgeries. If I'd already had 4 open heart surgeries, I'd be like, not today, so that's going to be one of our biggest barriers, is being able to continue that deafblind person with him.
Yeah, thanks for all sharing that. And I wanted to change gears and talk a little bit. We're starting to get some questions in the chat about kind of living arrangements. And I know, Nancy, you've already spoken a little bit about Jacob's living situation, but I'm wondering, Jody and Minnie, if you could talk a little bit about the plans for Andrew and Nolan. And Nancy, of course, you can feel free to jump in with anything else that you wanted to add in terms of like how'd you go about setting that up for him?
Okay, for now, Nolan's just going to live with us. He says he would prefer to live with us. I think there was a time when he wanted to go away to college and live in the dorms because that's what his siblings did, and he thinks he needs to do everything that they do. But I think he's coming to realize that, that would be pretty challenging for him at this point. And so we don't really want to look at a group home yet. So he will stay with us probably for as long as he can.
I never really wanted to accept the fact that Andrew would want to be around other people, but Perkins, Andrew being able to be in the residential program at Perkins, it's given him that knowledge, because Andrew was an only child. So, he never knew what it was like to share. I remember his first year at Perkins, he had a roommate, and I was like, oh God, Andrew's got a roommate and he's never shared anything. So, the best experience is a learned experience. We know that as adults, so why don't we think that same for our children? As for right now, we live in a very rural area that has very limited resources. I always had this vision that Andrew would live in a tiny house, and then that would be Andrew's house. It'd be on our farm, and if something happened to Doug and I, then Andrew would still have his house. When we were doing some of that prep work with Andrew about where do you want to work and how do you want to work, we also throwed in some things about how do you want to live. Do you want to live with other people, or do you want to live by yourself? Do you want to live with mama and daddy? He really did say he wanted to still live with mama and daddy, but for some reason now he advocates to go back to Perkins to be with his friends, because he's never said the word friends before. Now he says the word friends. So I'm not going to not say that that's a possibility for him, but we do have some really crappy group homes around where I live. So that would be the reason why he would not be able to do something like that, would be due to limited resources. But there again, that's going to be a barrier that we have to face. For right now, Andrew likes to be on his own, like in his little secluded area and things like that. But I think his thing is he wants to be with people when he wants to be with people, but he wants to be by himself when he wants to be by himself. And I'm like, welcome to adulthood, darling. So we're still in a balance when it comes to that.
I just wanted to add that the question that came up about how you decide, how do you listen to what they're saying about where they want to live and where they want to work and everything, that all comes out in the person-centered plan, because one of the questions that's asked are, what is this person like and what is this person not like? And that helps drive where the plan goes eventually. And also, I just wanted to say that the reason we wanted to have Jacob in his own home is because we've watched other adults who are deafblind or have disabilities lose their parents, and then they're just lost because they've been living with their parents all their life. So we wanted to have a setup so that if something happens to us, his world can still continue, with his siblings taking over or something like that. So
looks like in the chat, someone says that their daughter is using self-direction. And applied self-direction is the national clearinghouse for how to get this started. I'll look and see if I can find a link to that to put it in the chat. And looks like she has 24/7 care and lives in a home next to theirs. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
yeah, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, me neither. I'm gonna go look it up now.
Yeah.
But first, I should pose another question to the group so don't leave us in silence. And it might be helpful to, and I'm sure this is going to vary so much from state to state, but I'm wondering if it might be helpful for attendees to hear about how you navigated things like Medicaid or like SSI and things like that.
Jacob has what's called a Medicaid habilitation waiver. And in Michigan, there used to be a limited number so Medicaid gives the money to each state, and the state legislature decides how it will be administered. So in Michigan, there were a limited number, and when Jacob needed it, someone had just happened to have died just before that, so one came open. But I understand our state now has an unlimited number. I think our wonderful governor has changed that. So a habilitation waiver means that they're waiving the requirement that the person live in an institution or institutionalized living, and they're allowing the person to take the money and live the way they want to live. So this is the money that the state of Michigan would have paid for Jacob to live in an institution. or even a group home, and they release it to his team to decide how he would live. And so it's a, I just saw, we just redid his budget today. His budget is now $150-something thousand just for his employees. So we still pay, we bought the house. That's something that not everybody can afford to do, I know, but we just purchased the house so he wouldn't have to use that money for that. And then he pays us rent out of his SSI, because otherwise he'll have too much SSI and you have to spend it down. But yeah, we had agencies that helped us navigate all of that.
Well, Nolan, it was COVID when it was time for us to do guardianship and sign up for SSI. So that was a little bit of a nightmare because we couldn't have any in-person visits. But the SSI went fairly smoothly. Medicaid has been a little bit of a nightmare because in Michigan, we had children's special health care for a long time, but then when he turned 20, they just switched him over to Medicaid. So when we took guardianship, it's kind of, we got a letter in the mail that said he's on Medicaid now. And he does not have a personal caseworker anymore. And so that is very difficult. If you have a question, no one knows the answer to it. So I don't even know how to help anyone as far as the Medicaid problems go. You just have to be very persistent and you have to ask for people's supervisors to get answers.
Right, because special education, one thing that's a big shock when your child comes to adulthood is that special education is mandated. It's the law, the government mandates it, but adult services are not. So you just kind of have to figure out what they are and try to get them. And it's kind of ridiculous sometimes, all the advocacy we have to do. And, like Minnie, you become you get a lot of expertise in special education and working with the schools. As soon as they graduate, you're starting from square one again, with guardianship and Social Security and Medicaid. And yeah, it's tough.
My only advice is, yes, you have to be very, very persistent all the time and you cannot give up.
And there are often presentations at the Charge Conference about these things, people that are helpful with that.
Perfect.
So square
go ahead,
one,
Maddie.
square one right here. Square one right here. And it said you got to get back to square one. So it's the weirdest thing is that each state is different. Jody and Nancy coming both from Michigan, their journey is a little bit, the same, but ours is a little different because here in South Carolina, Andrew, so he was on early intervention, but then he should have been rolled back over into our disability and special needs departments. He was, but although he was left in intake for 12 years, which was another thing his mama determined after she was advocating for him for so long. And I can remember, all of that's supposed to be tied into those transition meetings and things like that when you have at school, and they're supposed to make sure that they're connected to all the places that they should have been connected to. Well, we have waivers here in South Carolina too, but at present time, most of the waivers that my child needs is 7 to 10 years long is the waiting list. So when people ask me what age do you start transition, I say birth. That's when you start learning about what you need when they're an adult. And I don't say that to scare people because I talk with clients all the time, and that's the first thing I tell them is that we need to make sure that they're connected to these different services. South Carolina, we also have South Carolina Commission for the Blind. We don't have South Carolina Commission for the Deaf. South Carolina, our standards for blindness is a little bit different. Andrew does not meet the need of being blind in the state of South Carolina, although he walks with a cane and needs orientation and ability, and he has a teacher with vision impaired, all that good stuff. That's one of my roads that I'm on right now. Medicaid and SSI, it was pretty easy because South Carolina, once you receive SSI, Medicaid is automatically attached to it. Andrew, on the other hand, we did not seek guardianship of Andrew. We chose to go the supported decision-making route, which just means we have taught Andrew the power of making his own decisions, and we want to be able to let him make those decisions as much as possible through support. which means he will have somebody there to give him the information the way that he needs it so that he can answer that yes or no question, or yes, I want to do this, or no, I don't want to do that. As parents, we also, thank you, Miss Nancy, you taught me a lot. As we have to put procedural safeguards in place for our children all the time, we also know that, you know, supported decision making is not really a legal thing in South Carolina, but there are legal things that we can do. And one of the things that we are in the process of getting done is, you know, the powers of attorney for medical, financial, and some of those things, because although Andrew can make a decision with support, and Andrew will always need and have support, we also want to put safeguards in place that somebody doesn't take him to a car dealership and say, Andrew, I need you to, will you, you know, help me get this car, or, you know, do anything like that. So that we still, as his parents, want to make sure that we keep him safe when it comes to those kind of things. But we also know that guardianship, it is still a possibility. If it gets to the point where we feel like something like that is needed, that will always be a possibility. But for right now, with everything that I've learned and all the connections that I have, we felt like supported decision making was going to be the best thing for Andrew. And yes, I'm doing a presentation at put in to do a presentation at Charge about supported decision making. Fingers
And
crossed.
speaking of, I just wanted to put a plug in our last few minutes here that if this a wonderful panel has left you wanting more and wanting to learn more about transition, I would highly encourage you to register for the Charge conference when registration opens this next month. There have been a lot of excellent proposals that have been submitted related to transition, and there's going to be a lot of really good information, and there's so much to learn as you all have seen. We are getting some thank yous in the chat. I just want to give a little round of applause for our wonderful presenters today. Thank you so much for sharing about your journey and for getting to share your adult sons with us. It's been so great to hear about how hard you each have fought for them and what they're doing now.
And I just wanted to say one last thing, and that is whenever I present on Jacob at the Charge conference or anything, it always sounds all rosy and fun and easy and lovely and it's perfect, but it's hard. And there have been a lot of roadblocks. So it's not an easy process, but you know, we do what we can for our kids.
Thank you, Nancy, though, for continuing, Miss Nancy, to continuing to educate all of us, because, you know, I can remember the first time I heard the power of Jacob and I was like, oh my, I got a lot of work to do.
I also put in a presentation, I don't know if it'll be accepted, on how we got from here to there on Jacob's transition. So
Yeah.
more details there possibly.
Wonderful.
Exciting stuff.
All right. Well, I don't see any more active questions in the chat, so I think that we will call it there. This has been so great, and thank you everyone for coming. And this has been recorded, so if anyone else that you want them to see it, this should be, I think that we usually send it out in some way or post it on the website after the fact.
Thank you. Really enjoyed doing this.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll stay here just to monitor if any questions trickle in, but everyone is free to get on with their evening.
Thank you, Lily.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone. Bye. I'm gonna stop the recording.